and welcome to today's webinar on eliminating blind spots with 360-degree overviews with the new FLEXIDOME panoramic 5100i cameras. My name is Ann Insero, and I'll be the moderator for this webinar. A few logistics before we begin. All audience lines have been muted to ensure quality audio, and we are recording this webinar and will post it online for viewing later. We will answer questions today at the end of the presentation. To submit a question, please enter it in the Q&A tab in the WebEx platform. You can ask questions at any time throughout the presentation. Your presenter today will be Jim Kasperek, Regional Marketing Manager for our fixed cameras in North America. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jim to begin our presentation.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you everybody for attending and wanting to find out a little bit more information about our FLEXIDOME Panoramic 5100i. It's a new product we just introduced about 7-8 months ago. And some of the things we're going to want to talk about is how this product differentiates from our predecessor in the market and what sets itself aside. And we're going to talk about 4 distinctive pillars, if you'll call that. So we're going to talk about our artificial intelligence, our AI, or our tried and true IVA analytics, our camera trainer, and then also we'll talk about the new and upcoming audio analytics that the camera has, the highest quality or relevant images using a stereographic lens, which gives us a much wider field of view and a better dispersion of the pixels all along the image, getting rid of any of the edge distortions you see traditionally in some of the other panoramic cameras. Some of the improvements, we'll talk about IR in the 5 controllable zones that come with that IR, just not IRO. We can control it in the areas that we need it. Both our connectivity for both our audio I/O, alarm I/O, and the new Hdmi output that we have on it. We'll also talk about the ease of installation. It is a much easier camera to install than some of our predecessors. And then with our new SoC, what we call our CPP, the CPP14 brings a lot more horsepower into the game and allows us to do a lot more with our imaging. So the image performance, our image performance with a 6 or 12 megapixel sensor, depending upon which model you choose, and with the lens, it increases the pixels that we can put on target, including with IR. Some of the improvements are also with multi-streaming. So we have 4 configurable streams, and each one of those streams you have multiple channels for the edge dewarping. And you can use H.265, H.264, MJPEG, and configurable frame rates and resolutions per stream. And then we'll talk about the built-in intelligence for our IVA, our camera trainer, and our new AI-based analytics. And then, of course, with all Bosch products, the data security that comes along with it. So with the audio analytics, this is one of the newest things that we'll be introducing later this year. So the cameras come with 3 MEMS microphones, so they're digital microphones, they're not analog microphones, and it's used for analyzing the audio acoustic signatures. So when people are saying, well, we're recording audio, with the digital microphones, it's actually a discriminator. It's listening for specific acoustical signatures. It's not actually listening to audio. You can use, though, forever using for audio. With these MEMS microphones, they're a lot more sensitive than the traditional microphones. And with the audio AI, it will be improved upon the launch of it, which will be around Q4 of this year. But the first is going to be gunshot detection and then glass break. So for like in parking garages, for car windows or businesses, something like that, or the gunshot. And then it will be moving on and improving to screaming, other loud noises, looking into specific word detection, as well as T3 and T4 CO2 and smoke alarm detection. And then with the 3 MEMS microphones, the camera is able to localize the direction of the audio, where it's coming from. There's 2 different models. We have an indoor model and an outdoor model, or we'll call it an environmental model. You can use it indoors. The indoor model is an IK8. The outdoor model is IP66 Nemo 4X. NEMA TS2, and it's IK10, including the bubble. So you have the ability with two-way audio, the 3 built-in MEMS microphones, and you have a wide operating temperature up to 131 degrees Fahrenheit with the environmental or the outdoor model. The HDMI output. If you think about what do we use for the HDMI output, if you look at it like an interrogation monitor or something when you're going into a retail location or store, using the camera to get a good overview, but putting the specific image you want. So either at the high value counters where people want, at the checkout counters or something. And then it's compatible with all of our modular accessories. And then it does support up the micro SD cards. So the easy of installation, the indoor model is the easiest. On board, you have your 3 MEMS microphones. You have the 2 mounting holes, and then the cover is it's a paintable cover, and you just slide it on, you twist, and it clicks into place. The imager, which is unique, is something we haven't been able to do in the past. The imager will rotate, so you can actually mount the camera, and then you can rotate the imager to obtain the field of view or the orientation that you want it to appear in your VMS. The outdoor, the environmental version, is a slightly different installation. It's 3 steps. You have the mounting plate. We do have a conduit back box that you can use if you need to do surface mount with conduit. Then the camera body, and then, the mounting plate mounts to your typical single gang, double gang 4S boxes. The camera body itself, you align and you just click it into the mount. So it just snaps into place. You can make your connections. You can rotate the imager as needed. And then you assemble just the bubble or the top of the camera and you screw it on. When you screw on the top of the camera, that secures it all the way down to the base, making it a simple installation. And what are some of the improvements that we've done over our the predecessor, the 7000 series? One of the biggest ones, the most notable ones, there's 2. One is the field of view, 182 degree horizontal vertical field of view versus 178. This provides a much improved image capability. The camera is capable of, when it's mounted on the ceiling, it's capable of seeing the ceiling within 6 inches of the camera, within 6 inches of the camera. Also, the resolution. Yes, we use a 6 megapixel and a 12 megapixel sensor, but as you're probably aware, when you take a fisheye lens and you put it on a square imager, there's parts of that imager you're not going to use. So even though it's a 12 megapixel imager, you're not going to realize the full resolution. And then with the 5100i, using a new lens, a new imager, and some of our software, we're able to capture a significantly more pixels on those imagers. One of the other improvements that you're going to see is the MEMS microphones and the power input. So the environmental version, they're all PoE, but then the environmental version is also 12 volts or 24 volts, and these are redundant power sources so that if one power source or the other fails, it automatically takes over without forcing the camera to reboot. And then you have the HDMI outputs on the new cameras where we did not have that in the past. And then where's the improvements coming from an imaging perspective? So the predecessor, the 7000 series, used a hemispherical lens. With this lens, it pushes the pixel or the resolution out to the edges of the image, or away from the edges, but pushes them towards the center of the image and away from the edges. So it caused a little bit of distortion at the edges. With the new one, we're using a stereographic lens. With the stereographic lens, we're able to capture more. So again, with the 12 megapixel sensor, we're able to capture 9 megapixels of usable image space. The predecessor was 7 megapixels, so it gives us more pixels on target. And it evenly spreads the pixels, the lens, evenly spreads the pixels of the image throughout the image itself. And just to give you an idea, these cameras are mounted at the same height, 10 feet at a ceiling. And as you can see, the field of view on the predecessor is cut off. I can't see the full image circle or where I'd like to see down that hallway. With the new one, with the 182 degrees, I can see all the way down the hallway. I can see the ceiling, but I can see the complete room with one imager. I'm not worried about having to cut off or not be able to see part of the room. And so what that means is here, if we zoom in the same area, obviously I've got a much wider field of view with the 5100i, and that's what that 182 degrees gives us, improving that. Hey, with one camera I can see the entire room. With the 7000, I may want to have another camera somewhere in there to catch the end of that hallway. That's no longer necessary. And then let's talk about the different use cases. So the 360-degree panoramic overview, 6 and 12 megapixel resolution without blind spots. And we'll take a look at the video. Now this is dealing with the dory. So up to 149 feet away, we're able to detect someone moving. This is double the distance of our former 7000 series. And this is a use case of, say, a parking garage. And then up to 60 feet for observed. But in the parking garage, in this one, is one camera sees the entire parking garage. And as you can see, there's enough pixels on target throughout the entire image for our analytics and AI to actually work and to address any objects. Now we'll talk about the IR. This is something we haven't had in panoramic. So again, mounted up to 66 feet, you do have 5 different elements that are independently adjustable. So if wanted right here, if you felt that the image right in the center was a little too oversaturated or too bright, you could decrease the power on the IR, on the LED that's actually lighting it up, and increase and pushing it out to the maximum distance of what it is at 66 feet. And then in this use case, because some people are very cautious about using IVR analytics in a panoramic camera, but here, being able to monitor in that same parking garage, no parking zones. So we set it up, the camera is able to detect, you see the image, the circle image, we actually have the dewarped view, but now it's able to alert. So you can, again, like I said, use it for analytics. And then it is prepared for audio analytics. We're just in the process of working that into our firmware. And then 360 degrees with possibility to zoom in on objects of interest. So look about airports, border crossings, even warehouses, retail, commercial, whatever, being able to minimize the camera count, because then you're saving on licensing, but then being able to maximize and get the best image possible. So here's one room, quite a large room. Here's the overview. And then here's, in this room, there's 4 different points of entry. And then we can dewarp it. And with one camera, we get the entire room, but then we can also zoom in or stream out those individual points of interest like independent cameras. So that is your, how you would like to set this up is your choice. You can use a circle view, or again, you can set up as 4 different streams. And then complete coverage in a single without a blind spot. That same room, now we're just in a dewarped view. So if you prefer to see this in a dewarped view, then here's the entire room in a dewarped view. You see the entire, all points of entry, you see the complete room. So the choice would be yours on how you'd want to see this appear in your VMS or record. And then monitor all of our activity in a single area. So if you take a difficult thing is stairwells. So in this case, the camera is mounted on the wall in a 180 fashion. We see the entire overview. And not only that, I can pull out or call out those individual images so I can see more clearly otherwise. And then if you see here, you see the wide dynamic range capabilities of that camera, I have a clear view of what's going on inside, as well as I can see right outside that window. And if you want to know, can I see below the camera from the wall, if you look at the circular view, I can see the railing along the wall and the space between the railing and the wall. So it is a very wide field of view. And it does address multiple different use cases. And then situational awareness. We'll take a look at this video talking specifically about in a retail spot. So here's in the monitor right there above them as they're walking in, that's the HDMI output, so they can see themselves walking in, or very similar to the one on the wall. The 180 degrees, we do have a tilt mount, so if you want to actually see more, if you want to tilt it. And then one camera with your quad view. Again, being able to set up any way that you would like to have that camera appear into your VMS or record. And then a couple different use cases pop up. A lot of people think that with a panoramic camera, there's also another type of camera, and that's a multi-imager. And how does the panoramic camera compare to a multi-imager? And in this instance, we've compared our panoramic, our 12 megapixel and our 6 megapixel up against a 8 megapixel or 2x4 and a 20 megapixel 4x5. And to give you an idea of how this is relevant and where you see the improvements, I guess you would want to call that, or we'll talk about the different types of dewarping. You have your EPTZ, you can have your quad view, your panoramic, double panoramic, corridor. So then addressing the ability of, say, like a dual head camera in a corridor, instead of using, two cameras in one space or using a dual head camera, you can use the panoramic and give you that dual head camera view or the full panoramic view, the full circular setup. So in this, we've compared, if we take a multi-imager, both on the left-hand side as your 5 megapixel, 77 degree fixed lens, on the below is your 97.5 or your 3.7 millimeter. On the right-hand side, and this is where we see the biggest usage to give you the full 360s, usually using a 2.4 millimeter, gives you, anywhere from 128 to 135 degrees, depending upon the manufacturer, or a 3.6 millimeter. So here is that same image, and we can actually see the multi-imager mounted right next to our panoramic. So when I said you can actually see the ceiling within 6 inches, yes, you can right here. So that same image with our panoramic is giving you the full 360 of the room. And if you wanted, you could have a fifth stream on a different channel, giving you your full look down or the full circle. So you have your 360, and then you can get your full circle to give you the below view. So again, how you choose to put it in your VMS, it's very flexible. And then one of the other ones is the resolution, and then the image quality. So comparing this to the 2 megapixel, you can see that the image is just a little bit darker. The wide dynamic range is not as there as with the our panoramic. So you have a much better image quality, overall image quality. And then when you digitally zoom in, it's giving you that same quality. It's very comparable, but you're doing it with a single camera, easier to install, doesn't weigh 35 pounds, much easier to configure, and you can do this all from the edge. You don't have to mechanically do something at the camera itself. So you can actually change the way you want the images to appear at any time. And then we have the 135 degree, giving you an idea from the same image. That's a 135 degree view on the left-hand side, and that is the same image that you're going to get with the panoramic, just setting up the streaming. What you're going to see with the panoramic camera, with the 5100i, you have a better wide dynamic range and a better white balance. You have a better white balance using, because you've got incandescent or fluorescent lighting in here. You get a little yellow hue in the color on the multi-imager. And these cameras were done out of the box, again, with no configuration really to the image settings. It's the default image settings out of the box. So you get the same field of view, better image, better wide dynamic range, and same pixels on target as you would with a dedicated 2-megapixel sensor. So some of the conclusions: can we use this in place of a multi-imager? You could. It's going to depend upon your individual use cases and how you need it to be deployed. But it does have, the multi-imager does provide distortion at the 135 degrees. You start to see the curvature at the edges. With the edge dewarping on the 5100, it minimizes that because it dewarps it at the edge completely. Or if you want, you can dewarp it at the client side. That's your prerogative on how you want to do that. It has better HDR with 120 dB, so it has a much better wide dynamic range performance than the multi-imagers. And then better white balance. Again, like I said, these were out of the box, but by default, it has a better white balance. And then regardless of the dedicated 2-megapixel sensor, the multi-imager, the panoramic, the sharpness and the details are very close. So again, it gives you the same or better pixels on target than a multi-imager at a better cost, and also easier to install. So overall, a better solution for what you may be looking for. And then to summarize all of it, there are two different variants. There's the indoor and the outdoor. The indoor does not have IR. It's the outdoor, the environmental version that does have IR. The indoor is PoE only. The outdoor, you have PoE, 12 or 24 volts. So it gives you, more robust flexibility in the power. They both have the MEMS microphones, the 3 digital microphones. Again, they're more of acoustical discriminators, but they can be used for audio. So if you need it in a situation where you needed to be able to record audio, it can do that, or it can be a discriminator, or it can be disabled completely with a license. Both are simplified installations compatible with our unified or universal accessories, the Hdmi Output. So right now the Hdmi Output provides you with a circle output. The dewarped Hdmi Output will be coming in about 2 months with the firmware update. So all of the enhancements that you will see with the camera moving forward will just be through simple firmware updates. And then there are IVA. So our tried and true IVA is capable with our camera trainer. So if the 14 different rule sets within our IVA aren't applicable to your use case, you can use Camera Trainer to train the camera to your specific use case, being able to detect when a gate is up or a gate is down, when there's a vehicle where it's somewhere it shouldn't be, or the gate's down and there's a vehicle there. So you can use Camera Trainer for that, or machine learning, and then our integrated audio for our analytics that we talked about. That will be coming towards Q4 of this year. And that again will be through a firmware update. The Stereographic Lens. The Stereographic Lens gives us much better resolution, giving us 9 megapixels worth of resolution versus our previous 7 megapixels. So we're able to put more pixels on target, giving us a much wider field of view and an even disbursement of the pixels throughout the entire image. And then 120 dB. So it has a very good wide dynamic range, being able to discriminate between indoors and outdoors and keeping that balance in extremes. And then our data security. So being able to support up to 4K keys, as with our built-in secure element, which is basically a TPM functionality, but with using our secure element and our SoC. And then with that, I'd like to thank everybody, and I'll look forward to your questions in the chat.
Thanks, Jim, for that presentation. As a reminder, please submit your questions using the Q&A tab, and we'll get to as many as we can. Our first question today is, what type of IR does the camera have?
I think it's 840 nanometers.
Okay. And are the different views set up in the camera's web page or configuration manager? And can those views be displayed in Operator Client?
Yes, it'd be done through the configuration manager. And yes, they can be viewed depending upon, because you have 4 configurable streams. Each stream has multiple channels. So you can, yes, pull those into your VMS. So you can have your 4, so you can have on one camera, the 4 channels, have your 4 cameras set up the way you want, the 4 views the way you want, and then you can have your 5th one coming in from a different channel, and that could be your 360, or if you wanted, it could be blown up a little bit so you can see directly below the camera, and then your 4 panoramic cameras, so you can turn it into basically a 360 multi-imager camera.
Okay.
But it's very flexible in how they would want to be able to configure that.
Great. And what is the IP rating for outdoor models?
IP66, NEMA TS2. So TS2 and NEMA 4X.
Okay. And what are the benefits of the microphones integrated into this camera?
There's a lot of benefits with because we made a decision to use digital microphones, the MEMS microphones. They're more sensitive. And then trying to address what we wanted to do, we found the MEMS microphones because there's a large demand for, well, gunshot detection is one. Also for crowd detection or noise detection. So, if things start, screaming, yelling, that digital microphones allow us to discriminate that and get a more accurate, more accurate audio than with a traditional microphone. But if an additional microphone is needed or wanted, or if there's a different microphone that wants to be used, we also do have the audio inputs. So then they can use a third party or a different microphone if necessary.
And there's a question about, are there legal restrictions with respect to recording audio?
Well, then you're going to have to you're going to have to consult with the authorities having jurisdiction with where you're doing this, because the laws nationwide are vastly different. Some states, some jurisdictions, and in some instances, it's only a single party needs to know. In some jurisdictions, you have to have dual party. And in some jurisdictions, say like in a police department, and there is no expectation of privacy. So it really depends upon the use cases. You'd have to consult with the authorities having jurisdictions and your specific use case.
Okay, and I think you covered this a little bit already, but maybe expand on it a little bit more. Does the IR allow for adjustments to suit the environment?
Yes, it does. So there's 5 separate adjustable elements. So if you have it mounted up in a corner towards a wall, you can, and you don't want to oversaturate the image by reflecting off that concrete wall, you can turn down the IR illuminator that's pointing towards that wall so it doesn't overdrive the image. And you can manipulate all 4. So you have one for, if you look at it north, south, east, and west, if you want to look at it that. So you have one imager for north, south, east, and west, and then you have one IR LED for directly below the camera. Each one can be adjusted independently, providing a lot of flexibility and in improving your image.
Great, thank you, Jim. That's all the time that we have for today. You will soon receive a follow-up email with the recording of this webinar as well as links to additional information. We appreciate your attention and thank you for attending.